Hello there, guys. In this tutorial, we are going to talk about user identification, authentication, and authorization. And honestly, this doesn't really have a lot to do with Linux itself, because these concepts are sort of universal to computer security. But we have to cover those in order for us to understand how does Linux handle security as it relates to processes and giving certain users rights to modify processes and actually kind of not giving that right to other users. Okay, so we are going to talk about identification, authentication, and authorization. Okay, and I will explain it on an example of me getting into a club. Okay, so let's say that I want to go into a club. It's Friday. I'm like, hey, I'd like to go into some club. I'd like to go into club. I like to go into club, and then I'm like, okay, let me get into the club. So let's say that I want to get into the aforementioned club. I approach the bouncer and he asks me who I am. I answer with my full name. Okay, so when the bouncer asks me who are you, I say my name is Mislav Juric. That is identification. Okay, so the first step is identification. I identify myself as Mislav Juric. Okay, and that is how my name is actually pronounced, but I always have to consciously focus on it because when I'm speaking English, I pronounce it like an English person would pronounce it. Okay, so anyway, identification is me providing my identity. Then the bouncer asks me to prove my identity, either via my identity card or whatever else. This is called authentication. Okay, so the second step is called authentication. Okay, so basically what this means is that authentication, I think I spelled it correctly. If I spell something incorrectly, please don't take it for evil. It was not my intention to do so. So basically, what is authentication? Authentication is so first we have identification. So somebody asks you, who are you? You say, who are you? But what if I say, for example, I'm Brad Pitt? Well, then the bouncer says, okay, well, give me some ID or something that I can check that you are, in fact, the person you are presenting yourself to be. Okay, so then I give him my ID, and he says, well, you're not Brad Pitt, you are Mislav Juric, and so in that fact, you can't enter the club. However, if I say I'm Mislav Juric, and he says, okay, prove it, I show my ID, and he sees, okay, his name is Mislav Juric, then I have successfully authenticated myself. Okay, and then in the end, if my identity card is valid, okay, so I said I'm Mislav Juric, I gave him my ID card, and he checked, okay, this is valid. The bouncer verifies who I am. Okay, so he verified, he's sure, okay, this guy really is Mislav Juric. Then the bouncer checks the list, quote unquote, the list, and sees if I'm on the list. And by the list, I mean the list to enter the club. This is called authorization. Okay, so this is called authorization. Okay, so basically this last step is sort of like so these first two steps are kind of like being sure that I am who I say I am. Okay, so the first step, I just identify myself. The second step is actually, okay, so the second step is actually more accurately said what I just said. The second step is actually, okay, is this guy who he says he is? And then the third step is like, okay, this guy is who he says he is, but does he have the right to do the thing he's asking me to do, which is in our particular case, enter the club. Okay, so authorization is checking if a particular user has particular rights. In this case, if I'm allowed to enter the club. Okay, and now let's talk about how all of this relates to operating system and not just some nightclubs. Okay, so these mechanisms exist within the operating system and are more important for security. I apologize. Think of operating system as the club bouncer and of me as someone trying to mingle around with the processes running on my computer. We talked about user IDs associated with the process IDs in the previous tutorial. So, for example, if I am a user with ID 4 trying to modify a process started by a user with ID 5, I would not be authorized to do so, and the operating system would not allow me to do so, right? Because if the operating system asked me to identify, I'd say I'm user with ID 4. Okay, he has proved it. I somehow prove it. Okay, I am the user with ID 4. But then the operating system would say, but hey, wait, you're not allowed to modify this process because this process was started by the user with ID 5, not the user with ID 4. Okay? And I don't think that it's that important for you to know the details of how this is done exactly, but just to know that this is done so that there is some measure of security within the system. Okay? And again, this matters when we come to scenarios where there are multiple users, because in those scenarios, if you're just only one user using your computer, then this really doesn't really matter, right? Because pretty much you're starting all processes. And I mean, to be frank, there are multiple users on your computer, even if you're the only user. So there's the super user, right? So there's that. So basically, some processes are started by the super user, which is the root. So even if you are the only user technically on your computer, you actually have the super user. Okay, so let me just kind of mention that. But I meant to say, if you really had multiple people using the computer, that way they couldn't mangle with each other's processes. Okay, so these three steps, again, they're relevant for security, not only for the Linux operating system. They appear when you're talking about computer security pretty much all the time. I know that at college I think I heard about these steps like at least 3 times on 3 different classes, so they're really important. Okay, so that's why I want to introduce them and to show you how they relate to the Linux operating system. Okay, so thank you guys for watching. I hope it's been interesting. I hope you learned something useful, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Talk soon.